Motherfucker.
What was that?
Swear. Thought we were having a swear this week.
Unbelievable.
So naughty. I like how you put your naughty schoolboy expression on as well.
He's so pleased with himself, isn't
It
he?
really
So
is.
pleased. Look at him.
What's a naughty boy impression?
What you've just done, mate.
What did I do?
That's the best impression you do.
Oh,
Because
not
your others all suck.
what? Eat, dirty Anti-Burnham. Number
Oh, that's
10 North. You're coming up number 10 North.
Hello and welcome to Everything's Fine, probably your weekly antidote to bad news. I'm Jim. I'm joined, as I so often am, by Stu and Gemma. How are we this week, panel?
Yeah, we're all good, aren't we?
We're warm. I think it's fair to say once again we're warm.
Yeah, I don't think there's many people this week who are not warm.
No.
Jim was telling me about his air conditioning machine, which blows out hot air.
Yeah.
Oh, handy.
It's not great. When I contacted the manufacturer, I won't say who they are on air, they said, yeah, it'll do that when it's hot. I thought, well, when it's hot is when I kind of need it to do cold air, really. So we had a frank discussion and they've agreed to give me my money back. How was Nick Cave?
Oh, Nick Cave was tremendous.
Yeah.
Love Nick Cave. Went to Brighton on Friday. Flaming Lips, have you ever heard of them?
I have heard of them.
They were awesome. What a show they put on. Plenty of inflatables in the crowd. But with Nick Cave, guess who turned up? Special guest.
Highly.
She did. So we had a rendition. Is it Wild Rose, that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So she came on and did that. But I think the next day was Pride. So she's probably there for that. Because I think Madonna turned up as well, didn't she, the next day?
Did she?
They had Pride in the same park the next day. But yeah, Nick Cave.
I would say
Awesome.
Kylie was there just for you, to be fair, Stu.
Yeah, she was. So I think Nick Cave lived there for about 20 years in Brighton. This was his homecoming. I did read about it. It was quite sad, wasn't it? How he sort of left. His sort of son died. He fell off a cliff when he lived there, and so I don't think he's been back since. So that it's quite poignant, quite emotional, but a special gig. And Kylie Minogue.
Well, you can't have everything. So can I begin this week by saying Donald Trump,
Oh,
just fuck off. Honestly, Suze, just fuck right off. So for the last two episodes, we've been talking about the incredible things people are doing for the environment. Britain finally signed the High Seas Treaty. Brazil slowed deforestation in the Amazon. American states have banned forever chemicals. We even spent an hour talking to Josh Dorfman about the astonishing innovation happening all over the world. And then Donald Trump looked at it all and apparently thought, oh, you know what would really improve things? Industrializing the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. I mean, who looks at the one part of the planet we've barely explored and says, get the diggers? Captain fucking stupid, that's who. It's like discovering Tutankhamun's tomb and immediately announcing plans for an underground car park. Honestly, the man's got all the environmental sensitivity of a stag do in the Sistine Chapel. Scientists have spent decades trying to understand the deep ocean. We've discovered bizarre creatures that glow in the dark, animals that survive under immense pressure, entire ecosystems we've only just realised exist, and Trump's contribution is, has anyone checked whether there's anything valuable underneath them? It's extraordinary. The administration says it wants the minerals needed for the technologies of the future. Well, okay, fine. Oh, but here's a thought. Not that Trump's capable of them. Why don't we listen to the engineers that we spent the last show talking about? The ones inventing better batteries, the ones finding ways to use fewer raw materials, the ones making renewable energy cheaper, the ones proving that innovation can reduce the need to keep ripping chunks out of the planet. Instead, Trump's answer seems to be, if in doubt, excavate. I mean, it's such a mad approach to life. If he walked into Kew Gardens, he'd ask where they keep the chainsaws. If he visited the Louvre, he'd wonder how much copper was in the roof. If aliens landed tomorrow, he'd be halfway through negotiating mineral rights on Mars before anyone had even offered him a cup of tea. And then he'd stick tariffs on Saturn. But what really infuriates me is that this isn't just another daft Trump headline where we can point and laugh at him and then move on. If deep sea mining causes the damage that many scientists fear, we're talking about ecosystems that have taken millions of years to develop. And millions, not election cycles or financial quarters, millions of years. You can't press Control Z on the Pacific Ocean. Over the last few weeks, we've deliberately been celebrating the people who go about making the future better: scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, innovators. But then Trump pops up to remind us that progress isn't inevitable. You have to defend it. So we can at least take some pleasure from the fact that Captain Fuckwad has spent the last week discovering reality is a stubborn little thing. It's been quite the week for him. His Attorney General pick had to backtrack. His administration had to admit that what he confidently described as vandalism at the reflecting pool in Washington was actually the government's own botched building work. Iran appears to have read his social media posts and gone, no, that's not what happened. His approval ratings have slumped into the low 30s. And what's his response to all this been? No, it's like watching a toddler argue with gravity. Mr. President, the polls say fake polls. No, Mr. President, your own Justice Department says wrong. No, Mr. President, Iran says fake Iran. I mean, the fascinating thing about Donald Trump is he genuinely appears to believe reality is something you can negotiate with. It would all be mildly amusing if he wasn't also the most powerful man on earth. But look, the midterms are coming. After that, he doesn't have to have any meaningful power at all. So Americans, when you go to vote, consider what sort of ancestor you want to be. How do you want history to remember your generation? Trump is a problem I can only satirise and shout about. But he's still my problem. He's everyone's problem. But if you can be a solution, then really, really just think about that. Please? Okay, let's get back to the hope and the optimism, shall we? Something you can't do while talking about Trump.
Well, I think after that, Jim, so good. We had Josh on last week, wasn't it?
Well, I want to start with something that reminded me about our conversation with Josh last week, if I may.
You may. I have thought about very little else since then.
Please do.
I know I didn't contribute a lot, but my word, I liked listening to that man talk.
He was
Absolutely.
very optimistic, wasn't he? That made you sort of feel like there is hope.
Absolutely. And there's one thing he said that really stuck with me. He said that people are almost becoming bored of hearing about climate change, not because it's not important, but because the stories start to sound the same. I think he's right. But then I spotted this headline: the world's largest sand battery. And you know I'm going to click on that. Because my immediate reaction was, what idiots buried a load of AA batteries on Bournemouth Beach? Turned out to be foolish, quite frankly. That's not what a sand battery is. So this has all happened in a small Finnish town called Pornainen. They've just switched on what's officially the world's largest sand battery, although sand battery is a bit misleading because it's actually filled with about 2,000 tonnes of crushed soapstone. Would you like to hear the clever bit?
I would.
I thought you would.
Yeah.
It doesn't store electricity.
Okay.
It stores heat. So one of the biggest problems with renewable energy isn't generating electricity anymore. But sometimes the wind blows at 3 a.m. Sometimes the sun shines when everyone's paddling in the sea. And so historically, a lot of that energy simply goes to waste. So instead, they use that cheap surplus renewable electricity to heat this enormous insulated silo of stone to around 500 degrees Celsius. And because it's so well insulated, it can keep that heat for days or even weeks. Then, when people actually need heating and hot water, the heat comes back out. So I think it's basically the world's largest thermos flask.
Mm.
So only the Finns could invent central heating by making an enormous packed lunch. Gemma, I think this sounds like something our granddad would have invented.
I think you're right.
If you'd shown this to our granddad, he'd have gone, see, told you insulation was important.
Well, did he like to go on about insulation?
Not necessarily, but he did like to tinker.
Did he? Yeah.
He was a tinkerer.
Oh.
Would he have ended up with a jar full of unnecessary screws and whatnot? Like left over?
Whether they were unnecessary or not, they would have ended up left over. Absolutely. Things that man would do with a piece of carpet. Anyway, can I ask you both something? If Josh had asked us last week to describe the battery of the future, would either of you have answered a giant hot pile of rocks? I'll level you, I wouldn't have.
I wouldn't, but I think that process is quite ancient. So, so it's good that they've harnessed that, from a natural point of view. So yeah, you heat the stone up and it retains the heat. And if they're using, like you said, renewable electricity to heat it up, it's fantastic, isn't it?
Then just pump it out when you need it. The results, if you don't know, are incredible. Heating emissions have fallen by around 70%.
Yeah.
They've completely eliminated the need for oil. Wood chip burning's fallen by around 60%. I mean, for a town of just 5,000 people, it's a massive achievement.
Isn't it?
So this is where I started thinking back to Josh again, because he also talked about artificial intelligence, not as some magical technology that's going to solve climate change by itself, but as a tool that can help us find smarter
Yeah,
ways of doing
it
things.
did.
So funnily enough, this week there was a major workshop bringing together AI researchers and climate scientists to look at exactly that. Not AI writing poetry or generating pictures of cats dressed as pirates, but AI helping electricity grids become smarter, helping renewable energy work more efficiently, and helping us get more from the clean energy that we're already producing. Funny, isn't it? Half the internet thinks AI is plotting world domination, the other half is asking it to work out when to switch the heating on. To be fair, I'd rather AI control my border than my social media feed. Oh, and I should just point out quickly that I enjoy a picture of a cat dressed as a pirate as much as the next man. I just don't know if it's helping particularly.
Well, it's funny though, isn't it?
It is funny.
Yeah, it is funny.
Have you got a picture of your cat dressed as a pirate?
On a Roomba, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
In Bath?
No, you didn't put a Roomba in the bath.
Not in the Bath, in Bath.
In Bath.
Yeah.
Why in Bath?
The University of Bath, with the research into Roombas.
For sure. Good callback.
There you go. The other thing Josh said was that climate technology isn't just becoming the ethical investment, it's becoming the sensible investment. And we've addressed this a few times in the past now. This story really proves it. Nobody built this battery because it looked futuristic. They built it because it cuts emissions. It cuts fuel bills. It reduces dependence on imported fuels. And over time, it will save money. And that's not just good for the planet, that's good business. And that's exactly why inventors are increasingly putting money into these sorts of technologies. Completely different conversation to the one we were having 10 years ago. But then at exactly the same time, we're still hearing politicians arguing the answer is simply drilling for more oil and gas. You know which ones. Meanwhile, a little town in Finland has said, actually, we found a way of needing less of it. Last week, Josh challenged us to think differently about climate news. This week, we've got a story about a giant insulated box full of hot rocks. It's not proof that the future is going to be wonderfully weird, but, it's a step in the right direction.
I think what I also liked what you said was although America are pushing fossil fuels, he says their actual economy isn't going in that direction. There's all this investment in green technology and so on and so forth. So a lot of it is just hubris, isn't it? Donald Trump propping up his shares in oil companies, no doubt.
I mean, we have also got in this country the North Sea advocates, of course.
Yeah,
Kevin
absolutely.
Knox and other such.
Yeah, and I'm sure they know this. I'm sure they do know this. But even if we got some oil out of the North Sea, it doesn't come to our country. It just goes into the world supply, and you just get some payment for it.
Yeah.
But so
It's more populist nonsense.
But it's not British oil for British people. It doesn't work.
Decent British oil.
It
Not like that foreign mutt.
it doesn't work like that. And I think the other thing I liked what he said was, we talked about conspiracy theories, didn't we? And about climate deniers. And he said, do you know what? Just ignore them. He said, because they're talking nonsense. So ignore them. It doesn't matter what they say. And actually, I thought about that. I thought, that's so right, isn't it? That really doesn't matter what they say because they're wrong, aren't they?
Absolutely. No, I tell you, if you haven't listened to our chat with Josh last week, then why not, for goodness sake? Get your head out your backside and give it a listen. No, not now, when you finish this episode, honestly. Right, what's next?
Well, here's a sentence I thought I'd never say on this podcast.
Go on.
Scientists have discovered a tapeworm that helps ants live almost 10 times longer.
You have my attention.
Right. Now, before you start Googling, Jim, and get distracted, just don't for a minute.
I put every device I own down.
This is not a wellness recommendation, by the way. This begins in a forest in Germany. Researchers have been studying a tiny species of ant. Normally, the worker ants live for about a year. Their queens, meanwhile, can live for around... How many years do you think the queens live for?
Well, I'm going to say about 11 years.
Yeah, Gemma, do you want to have a stab at that? Queen ants, typically.
I know that I'm sure that I've read this somewhere, and I'm probably going to say completely the wrong number, but I'm going to go 8 just because shits and giggles.
Yeah, 20 years, apparently. The queen ants live 20 years. So it's the insect equivalent of someone retiring at 65 while their boss just keeps turning up to work until they're 200. But the scientists have noticed something extraordinary. Some worker ants infected with a particular tapeworm weren't dying after a couple of years. Instead, they were living many times longer, and they started behaving a little like royalty. not Prince Andrew ants or anything
Why
like
should
that.
they not?
Absolutely. So
But when they started interbreeding and marrying their cousins.
so their fellow ants even started treating them differently, feeding them and looking after them as if they were also the queen. Before we crown the tapeworm as the latest life coach, here's the catch. The parasite isn't necessarily being kind, it's looking after itself, okay? So eventually the tapeworm, what it really wants to do is end up inside a woodpecker, something like that.
What a woodpecker.
Well, it's bigger, can get around more.
Whales are massive.
Yeah, well, we can't go from an ant to a whale.
Okay.
It's scale, isn't it? You've got to work your way up.
So woodpecker's your next step.
Well, I think that's a reasonable.
You got ant, woodpecker,
Yeah,
then
I don't know, aardvark, maybe. Cheetah,
right,
rhinoceros,
sure.
elephant, and then maybe the whale.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So the longer the ant
You
survives,
have a question, Gemma?
you want to say anything there, Gemma?
It was just beautiful seeing that play out. That was
Okay. So anyway, Gemma, the longer the ant survives, the greater chance of that happening, which is turning it, getting inside a woodpecker. I mean, who wouldn't? We've all been there, right?
What, you've tried to get inside a woodpecker?
When in Rome, a wild night out, who knows what might
It could
happen?
have some horrific consequences for you. Those things can really peck.
They can peck, absolutely. So people pay good money for that sort of thing.
Do they?
So I hear. This really isn't an act of generosity. It's more.
So what, you trying to get inside the woodpecker, or are we going back to the
We're going back to the tapeworm.
Okay.
This is more really a long-term business plan. So if Tapeworm came up with a long-term business plan, it would probably look, in the first instance, short to mid-term plan, get inside a woodpecker. But anyway, here's the fascinating part. Scientists discovered the tapeworm wasn't simply... Don't look at me like that. So...
I'm just wondering whether we can get this tapeworm on The Apprentice. I'd love to know what Claude made of his business plan.
So scientists have discovered the tapeworm wasn't simply making the ants ill. Instead, it was changing how some of their genes behave. So the infected ants became less active, metabolism shifted, and in some parts of their bodies, they started to resemble the queens. In other words, this tiny parasite had stumbled into one of science's biggest questions. What actually controls aging? Now, we're obviously not suggesting parasites are the future of healthy living, quite the opposite. So studies like this help scientists understand the biology of aging in entirely new ways. If researchers can work out which genes and biological pathways influence longer, healthier lives, it could eventually lead to treatments for age-related diseases in humans. Sometimes nature really does hide remarkable clues in the most strangest places. After all, penicillin came from mold, Velcro came from burrs stuck to a dog's fur, and now a humble tapeworm living inside an ant is helping scientists ask better questions about aging. There's another little lesson here as well, Jim. The ants that live longer also slowed down. So they're not suggesting the secrets for long life is sitting on the sofa, binge watching whatever you want all afternoon. Although scientifically speaking, the research is pointing towards that. But it's a reminder that modern life doesn't always reward slowing down. We're constantly told to do more, be more, achieve more. Yet some of the strongest evidence for human well-being points towards balance. Good sleep, strong relationships, movement, purpose, and recovery. You don't need a tapeworm. So the good news is that these parasites are not necessarily the link to old age, but it certainly does give us some new insights. Who doesn't want to live to 200?
I mean, only if you could slow the aging process.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, there you go. There's one thing this podcast has taught me is never to underestimate a scientist's ability to become fascinated by something the rest of us didn't even know existed. Okay, so we've gone from giant sand batteries to parasitic tapeworms hijacking ants' brains and then trying to get into woodpeckers, apparently. Let's move from one animal story to another, shall we? Because while some creatures have spent millions of years evolving increasingly bizarre ways to exploit other species, humans Well, I'm not saying they haven't done that, but they are occasionally capable of doing something rather wonderful. Gemma's next story is about an elephant called Julie, who after 40 years performing in a circus has finally retired to a purpose-built sanctuary in Portugal. Should restore your faith in humanity. Over to you, Gemma.
I wouldn't be me if I didn't bring a cute story, and this one has been a long time in the making. Meet the star of this story, Julie. Anyone who has been performing consistently for decades has absolutely earned a happy retirement. But Julie didn't choose her career because Julie is an African elephant. She was taken from the wild as a calf in the late 1980s and brought to Europe, where she started performing in 1988. For decades, she was part of the show, but never really had the chance to live like an elephant should. Things began to change in 2018 when Portugal passed a law banning wild animal performances. Circuses had until 2024 to comply, which was brilliant for animal welfare, but it left Julie in a bit of a limbo. When you're an elephant, you can't exactly pop into a retirement bungalow. And that's where the team at Pangay Elephant Sanctuary stepped in. They're building Europe's first sanctuary specifically for working elephants, a huge 1,000-acre space in
Alan who?
Alentejo.
He's a good lad.
He is, isn't he? I'm going to go again.
Good lad, Alan Tijo.
I've not met him.
Alentejo.
You're not?
No.
No, you must have met Alan Tijo.
No.
He's such a hit at parties.
Why does he never come to one of our?
I don't know. I don't suppose if I've invited him. Shall we?
Yeah, get him on to the next one.
Yeah, I'll ask Dave to invite him. Dave Middlesex.
Was he mates from Middlesex?
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Sense there.
A huge 1,000-acre space in Alentejo designed to give these animals a peaceful, natural life after years of performing or labour. Even while the sanctuary was still under construction, they reached out to Julie's former owner and started planning her move. It took 18 months of preparation, logistics, and a lot of difficult conversations, no doubt. And then, on June 30th, Julie made the journey, a 3-hour truck ride from her previous grounds and straight into her new home, and checking out her new watering hole like she'd been waiting her whole life for it, which frankly she had, bless her. Kate Moore, the sanctuary's managing director, put it, there couldn't be a more fitting first resident than Portugal's last circus elephant. Our focus now is to give Julie the best possible quality of life in her time ahead. And that's exactly what she's getting. The hope is that eventually there'll be another 20 to 35 elephants welcomed to the sanctuary, though they're starting small while more barns and fencing go up. It's a long-term project, but Julie is the beginning of something huge. And Julie won't be alone for long. Later this year, she's expected to be joined by Kariba, another African elephant in her 40s who currently lives alone in a Belgian zoo. Two older ladies, both wild caught decades ago, finally getting the peaceful companionship they should have had all along. Julie's story is a reminder that change doesn't always happen quickly, but when it does, it can be beautiful. It took new laws, a dedicated sanctuary team, and a whole lot of patience. But now one elephant who spent her life performing finally gets to spend her days simply being herself.
What a heartwarming story there.
That is
It
nice.
is. I'm intending to keep an eye out for updates, particularly when her new ring arrives.
Good for Julie.
Absolutely. Well, it's nice to know that after decades of entertaining us, someone finally asked what was best for the elephant. Okay, well, Stuart's next story asks whether we ought to start doing the same thing for ourselves and ask what's best for us.
When you hit 65, my understanding is you're issued with a pastel jumper, a Labrador, and an overwhelming desire to discuss compost. So we've got all that to do. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When you retire. Well, that's what happens when you retire.
This is a new thing.
That's always.
It's one of Andy Burnham's ideas.
Well, he's quite revolutionary on his ideas, but no, this is quite an old thing.
It doesn't sound very normal.
But anyway, nobody though told Stephen Walsh about this.
No one told me about it.
Well, yeah, you didn't know about it, but you do now, alongside Stephen Walsh. So Stephen, he spent most of his working life doing what many of us do, working. A lot.
Right.
He was such a workaholic that when he announced he was retiring, his business partners simply didn't believe him. They said, "Stephen, you'll never retire." He said, "Challenge accepted." I don't know if he quite said it like that anyway. But
it's a little bit aggressive.
Yeah. Anyway, the turning point came though, in an unexpected place, a hospital bed. At 57, Stephen was recovering from a stomach ulcer. Clearly, he'd worked too hard, didn't he? And he had one of those life moments where everything suddenly comes into focus. He said he thought, right, enough. Our life's too short. 3 years later, he retired for good. No consultancy on the side, no just one day a week, no mysterious role as a strategic advisor. He just retired. At first, it was brilliant. He said every DIY job that had been ignored for 20 years got done, shelves up, cupboards fixed, garden looking like it belonged on Garden's World. Then one morning, he realised he'd run out of things to fix. He said every day felt exactly the same. So instead of buying a sports car or becoming one of those people who reviews motorway service stations online, he did something much smarter. He moved into a retirement community while he was still young enough to enjoy it. Now, as a child, Stephen loved watching old Hollywood musicals. Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly, all the elegance of those bygone days. Unfortunately, when it came to dancing himself, he had all the grace of someone trying to avoid standing on those small Lego pieces. For decades, he convinced himself, I really can't dance. But then at the age of 67, someone started a tap dancing class. He went along, he bought some tap shoes. And when they arrived, he couldn't wait for the lesson. He said he put them on in his kitchen and then started having a bit of a tap dance. The neighbours were banging on the next door saying, "Are you okay, Stephen? We can hear tapping coming from your kitchen." Fast forwarded a few years and Stephen is now performing with his tap group, Pat's Happy Tappers. So they perform routines, they've done flash mobs, and they're currently dancing to Anything Goes, which is an appropriate title for a group of enthusiastic tap dancers who've all discovered that age really is just a number. So Stephen said tap dancing has given him purpose, belonging, friendship, and fun. Not bad for something he spent 67 years believing he couldn't do. So he says staying young, people think it's about expensive creams, miracle diets, tapeworms, or remembering how to use TikTok. But actually, it's about just trying something that scares you a little bit, learning, laughing, meeting people, and occasionally tap dancing around your kitchen. So, what's your version of tap dancing you think you'd like to do when you're retired? Any hobbies you've been putting off? Something you'd always like to do? Anything, Gemma?
I'd like to play an instrument.
Like to play an instrument? Yeah.
Do you still play saxophone? You used to play saxophone.
I played saxophone for a short while, but that was, yeah, I was put off quite badly when one of my teachers wanted me to join the orchestra and I couldn't make my saxophone make any noise whatsoever, which was fun. Fear.
But now, you could get a saxophone, try again. Doesn't matter, does it, for something you want to do? Well, I think what it does show is sometimes the second act turns out better than the first.
Thank you, Stu. And I think we've got some lessons that we can learn from the past on this as well, because this isn't entirely a new thing, is it?
No, it's just Stephen's highlighted that no one goes onto their deathbed, do they, and say, I wish I'd worked a bit harder. I wish I'd have done a few more days in the office. So it's about getting that work-life balance the best you can and not killing yourself over work, because nobody will remember it anyway, will they?
No one's going to thank you for it, really.
No one's going to thank you for it. So, never tried tap dance. You're a bit of a dancer, Gemma. Have you ever had a tap?
To do the obligatory tap, ballet and modern when I was...
Do you think you could tap along to Anything Goes?
I'm sure I could. How well is a very different question.
Is that something you'd like to put on the socials?
No. It's one of my old colleagues, bless him, there was a photo of me helping at an event, a fundraising event, and I was in my work polo shirt behind in the kitchen kind of doing teas and coffees and whatnot. He got it animated and I'm suddenly doing the YMCA and singing. The audio on that is something very, very special.
Again, back to AI. Back to AI.
Doing something useful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, making the world a better place.
So here's a reassuring thought. If you've ever stared blank, don't look at me like that. So here's a reassuring thought. If you ever stared blankly at your laptop, opened the fridge 6 times in an hour, or seriously considered moving to a cottage to keep alpacas, congratulations. You have something in common with a 5th century monk. Turns out burnout isn't a modern invention. Long before inboxes, Zoom meetings, and can I just grab 5 minutes, people were writing about brain fog, exhaustion, and the overwhelming desire to be absolutely anywhere except where they currently were. One of those peoples was John Cassian, writing around 1600 years ago. He described people feeling weary, hopeless, unable to concentrate, desperate for sleep, and convinced that whatever they were supposed to be doing could definitely wait until tomorrow. Sound familiar? Well, at first I assumed medieval burnout must have been caused by endless farming or hauling rocks around, but apparently not. These were monks. They'd signed up for peaceful, quiet lives devoted to prayer and reflection, and somehow still managed to become absolutely emotionally knackered. Which proves a very important point. Don't need Wi-Fi to feel overwhelmed. Historian Peter Jones became fascinated by this after experiencing his own burnout while working in Siberia. First of all, moving to Siberia always feels quite like a bold well-being strategy. But he said, I know what I needed, a really cold, fresh start. Living thousands of miles from home, struggling with language and feeling isolated, he found himself unable to work. Then while researching medieval history, he discovered people had been describing exactly the same feelings for centuries. But back then, they had a name for it, acedia. Today we probably call it burnout, emotional exhaustion, or simply feeling completely stuck. The fascinating thing is that medieval thinkers didn't see this as laziness. They understood it as something much deeper. A loss of purpose, a loss of joy, a kind of emotional flatness where nothing feels worth the effort. Honestly, that's a surprisingly compassionate view for people living in the Middle Ages. And they also had some surprisingly modern advice. Firstly, stop expecting to feel good all the time. One medieval writer compared difficult emotions to an invading army. You might never get rid of them completely, but you might be able to live alongside them without letting them take over. That's remarkably close to modern psychological approaches like acceptance and commitment therapy, which teaches us not to fight every uncomfortable feeling, but to acknowledge it and just accept it and keep moving forward. So the next piece of medieval wisdom, find your strong mountain, not literally, although a holiday may help. The idea was to anchor yourself to something bigger than your worries, something you love, people you care about, a purpose that reminds you why you get out of bed in the morning. And another medieval writer had this wonderfully hopeful image. His image was a field covered in thorns. It can still produce through. In other words, just because life feels difficult today doesn't mean it's always going to feel that way. Perhaps the biggest lesson is this: the monks didn't think struggling meant you'd failed. They thought struggling was simply part of being human. One writer compared to running across rough ground. If you run for long enough, you're going to stumble. Not because you're weak, because that's just what rough ground does. There's something deeply comforting about that. We spend so much time believing everyone else has life figured out, yet people have been worrying, overthinking, feeling overwhelmed, and wondering what they're doing for their lives for well over 1,000 years. So next time you have one of those days where your brain feels like it's just buffering, remember, you're not broken, you're just participating in one of humanity's oldest traditions.
Brilliant, thank you, Stu. So medieval monks might have had a healthier relationship with work than we do.
That's what it's saying.
Not the sentence I was expecting to say this morning, but okay.
Absolutely. And, you know, they just accepted the fact that we're just work in progress, we're humans, and sometimes you feel good, sometimes not so good. That's just moods. It's a bit like running over rough ground. Sometimes you're going to stumble. Wise words from the monks 1,000 years ago.
What do you think of that, Gemma?
I like it how Stu looked at me with what felt like a huge amount of reason just as he said that last line.
Yeah,
It's amazing how he can give the illusion of looking at people with reason.
Yeah.
Almost like he understands us. Well, thank you, Chad. It's a story that, I mean, if it does prove one thing, it's that sometimes progress isn't about inventing something new. Sometimes it's about listening to what we've known all along. Which brings us on neatly to our next couple of stories, because it's time for a section that I like to call Remember When We Told You About That Thing.
Remember when we told you about that thing?
Good title, yeah?
I think that's quite a catchy title.
Remember When We Told You About That Thing.
Okay.
So, first up, remember a couple of weeks ago we talked about PFAS?
Yes.
Yeah, forever chemicals. Chemicals that seem to have found their way into absolutely everything. Non-stick frying pans, waterproof jackets, food packaging, cosmetics. The first thing for years to have got into Stu's trousers. Why, I wouldn't be surprised if someone discovered they're in hobnobs. We talked about a couple of American states starting to ban them, right?
You're nasty.
I know. Well, look, now Sweden has basically gone, you know what? Let's get rid of these.
Good.
So from January 2028, Sweden plans to ban PFAS from a whole range of consumer products. And I think this is one of those stories where momentum is going to be really important. A few years ago, I mean, hardly anyone outside of environmental science had even heard the term PFAS,
No.
and now governments are starting to act. So Sweden probably won't be on its own for very long. The EU's already working on wider legislation that could eventually apply right across Europe. Fortunately, due to Brexit, we won't have to do what those unelected bureaucrats tell us, and we can keep slowly poisoning ourselves. Rule Britannia and all that.
Another Brexit benefit.
Good for us. Well, not really. Anyway, so this isn't just one country's bright idea. This is a sort of direction of travel. It's ironic, isn't it? That they're called forever chemicals, and yet everyone's starting to ban them. See, Alanis Morissette, that's what irony actually is. So there we go. More environmental progress happening at one law at a time. It's not particularly glamorous, but it is incredibly important.
Yeah. That's a worry, isn't it? That even in frying pans you get these forever chemicals, and also
You can your food in there, get straight into your body.
yeah, you know those little sponges you use to wash up with the green.
Washing up sponges.
Apparently they've got them in as well.
They're in so many things.
But you're washing up your plates and so on.
Yeah.
That's quite literally mad.
Yes.
So I'm all for this.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one bit of good news, but that's not all. Oh no, there's more.
Is this still under the same feature?
Still, the popularly named feature, remember when we told you about that thing? I think this one could stay.
Remember when we told you about that thing?
Cast your mind all the way back, if you
Okay.
can, to last summer.
Oh,
When we talked about how Paris had cleaned up the Seine so people could swim in it again.
yes.
And I distinctly remember sitting here saying, that's brilliant, but there's absolutely no chance we'll ever manage that in Britain. And then when it was mooted, we were sceptical. You particularly, I think, Stu.
Yeah, I do remember that now. Yeah, that sounded pretty grim.
Well, we might end up owing London an apology.
Oh,
Because Sadiq Khan has just launched a 10-year plan to clean up London's rivers. Not just to improve wildlife and reduce pollution, but to create more places where people can actually get in the water.
that'd be nice.
If you'd said that 10 years ago, most Londoners would have assumed it was some sort of punishment. So the plan aims to restore around 80 kilometres of rivers and hundreds of hectares of river habitat, with billions of pounds of investment coming from the mayor, water companies and other partners. Now, clearly, we won't all be swimming across Tower Bridge next summer. There's an enormous amount of work still to do, but you've got to love the ambition. Not all that long ago, remember, the Thames was biologically dead. Now there are seals. There are seahorses in the estuary. There's more than 100 species of fish. And now people are seriously talking about creating more opportunities to swim there safely. And that is extraordinary progress. Stu, you talked a while back about the rise of wild swimming. Have either of you given it a go in this long, hot summer?
No, I'm still put off by the fact that I don't trust the water quality.
Yeah. I mean, I quite like the idea right up to the point someone says the water's only actually 14 degrees.
I'm not so worried about the temperature. If someone could prove it was clean, I wasn't get ill, then I'd be away for that.
There's a reason we have swimming pools, right? But I think there is something really hopeful about this. Paris has shown it can be done. London wants to follow, and if that works, who knows? Maybe one day we'll be swimming in the Wensum.
Why not?
Well, mostly because of all the reeds. We'll probably die.
Okay. Apart from that,
incredibly dangerous river. Okay, we're going to finish now with one story that Gemma's brought in. Now, I think I know what this story is about. I believe it's something called the Library Dads. So if it's a story I found when I Googled, it's this brilliant initiative, gets dad reading with their children, using libraries, forging relationships. If it isn't, then this is going to be a really awkward introduction. Either way, it's Gemma's story now, so let's find out whether I've done my homework right.
Are you sitting comfortably?
Yep.
Well, this isn't the comfiest sofa, but we're doing our best.
I am.
Well, I'm going to begin anyway. Once upon a time, in the bustling heart of Atlanta, a new kind of fairy tale began. Not one with a castle, a dragon, or a magic wand, but one with a dad, a baby, and a library card. A story which set off a chain reaction of good news. Kari Arnold didn't set out to start a movement. He simply wanted a special ritual with his 4-month-old daughter, Aria. So, on a whim, he scooped her up, headed to the local library, and opened a book. That tiny moment, a dad reading to his baby, turned out to be the magic bean that grew into a beanstalk of brotherhood, literacy, and community. Firstly, the magic of being read to. Let's start with the literacy bit, because it's the obvious place to start. One of the most cited studies on early reading, Moll & Buss's meta-analysis, To Read or Not to Read, I like that, that's kind of cool, analysed decades of research and found a beautifully simple truth. Print exposure is associated with growth in vocabulary and knowledge. That's it. No complicated jargon, just the more children are read to, the more their vocabulary grows. And Aria is living proof. Her early language skills didn't just develop, they blossomed. Reading to a baby isn't just cute, it's cognitive weightlifting in disguise. The American Academy of Pediatrics backs this up in their literacy report, promoting early literacy through shared reading, stating shared reading strengthens language development and supports early relational health. But reading doesn't just grow vocabulary, it grows imagination and creativity. A longitudinal study on storybook exposure, early literacy and narrative skills study, found that children with greater storybook exposure produce more elaborate and coherent narratives. Put simply, kids who are read to tell better stories, imagine more deeply, and create richer worlds in their minds. And if adults ask questions and encourage predictions, dialogic reading, this is strengthened even further. Dialogic reading interventions improve children's expressive language and narrative skills. Expressive language plus narrative skills equals creativity's favourite cocktail. And who doesn't like a cocktail?
Mm.
And then there's symbolic thinking. The ability to pretend a cardboard box is a spaceship or a stick is a magic wand. The aptly named Symbolic Thinking and Story Exposure study found story exposure supports children's ability to use and understand symbolic representation. Symbolic representation is the foundation of imaginative play, creative problem solving, and later, writing, art, design, and innovation. So yes, reading grows vocabulary, but it also grows worlds. Enhanced child development is awesome, but the benefits don't stop there. Research such as the Early Relational Health and Caregiver Engagement Study shows that warm, responsive engagement strengthens the caregiver-child bond and supports mutual well-being. Kari didn't want this to be a father-daughter fairy tale told in isolation. He wanted other dads to feel what he was feeling, connection, confidence, and that quiet pride that comes from showing up. So he invited them, and they came, and they kept coming. One dad, Cassell Scott, said seeing so many engaged fathers in one place was eye-opening. Another, Derek Lampkin, brings all 3 of his children, 2 sons and a baby daughter, because as he puts it, it shows my boys that dads show up. And that's the heart of it. Not perfection, not performance, just presence. Which leads us nicely to my final good news takeaway from this initially simple-sounding story. Community. Because here's the truth. Fatherhood can be isolating. Modern masculinity can be confusing, and many men don't have spaces where they can show up vulnerably, gently, or joyfully. But Library Dads is that space. It's a room full of men modelling care, connection, and curiosity. It's dads cheering each other on. It's men seeing other men be tender, present, and emotionally available, and realising that strength doesn't have to be silent. Studies of men's well-being, like Men's Social Connection and Wellbeing Study, consistently show that positive social connection is a protective factor for men's mental health. And that's exactly what's happening here. Books are the excuse, brotherhood is the outcome. It's community without pressure, support without stigma, masculinity without armour. So yes, this story starts with a dad and a baby in a library, but it grows into something much bigger. A movement that boosts children's vocabulary, sparks creativity, celebrates active fatherhood, and quietly rewrites what healthy masculinity can look like. A fairy tale where heroes don't slay dragons, they read picture books, carry nappy bags, and build community one story at a time.
That's brilliant, that, isn't it? What a great initiative. Works on so many levels, doesn't it?
It's a day-to-day heroism that anyone can aspire to.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's a great place to leave it for this week. We've covered giant batteries made of hot rocks, Immortal ants, retired circus elephant, medieval burnout, forever chemicals, cleaner rivers, and Donald Trump's latest attempt to prove that if you give a property developer enough power, eventually they'll try to put a retail park on the Mariana Trench. Honestly, if you'd shown me today's running order 10 years ago, I'd have assumed I'd accidentally eaten the wrong kind of mushroom. The encouraging thing is most of today's stories have the same message. People getting on with fixing things without shouting about it. The person doing all the shouting is the one that no one should be listening to. Interesting, that, isn't it? This podcast exists to remind us that while the loud people are busy arguing, the clever people are usually too busy getting on with the job and generally behaving like grown-ups. If you've enjoyed the show, please do all the usual podcasty things. Follow us, leave a review, tell your friends, tell your family, tell complete strangers on the bus. Although maybe wait till they've taken their headphones off first. We'll be back next week with another special guest, and we're absolutely delighted that we'll be joined by comedian, broadcaster, author, traveller and professional collector of bizarre stories, Dom Jolly. We'll be talking about his career, his adventures around the world, the wonderfully odd corners of humanity he's uncovered, and knowing Dom, well, almost certainly disappeared down several unexpected rabbit holes along the way. If you've got any questions you would like us to ask Dom, get in touch during the week. We'll see if we can squeeze him into the conversation anywhere. Until then, be kind to yourselves, be kind to each other. If anyone suggests mining the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, shove their own shovels in an equally dark and difficult to reach place. I've been Jim, he's been Stu, she's been Gemma, and you've been listening to Everything's Fine, probably. Bye!
Ha 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 ha. All the laughs.